Hello! Now, there is ice on the top of these puddles still, which can mean only one thing: it's winter. But I don't know about you, Saunders, I still quite like driving. So, we've come here with two winter-oriented family performance cars. Matthew, what do you have?
Oh, I've brought this, the new Audi RS3 Quattro Saloon. It's very new and specialised and interesting and more expensive than it used to be.
Super duper. Is it almost as expensive as one of those?
Yes.
Excellent. That is a BMW M3 xDrive, which means it's a four-wheel drive M3 for the first time in the M3's history. So, Matt's going to drive that, I'm going to drive that, we're going to have a chat about them and decide which is the best winter performance car. The new four-wheel drive Audi RS3 has a 394 brake horsepower 5-cylinder engine. Lovely. And while UK prices start at around £50,000, by the time you've ticked some boxes, it can have a top speed of 180 miles an hour and a price of 65 grand plus. That brings it just about within the sphere of BMW's new M3 xDrive, the 503 horsepower 77 grand four-wheel drive M3 with its 3-litre straight-six engine. The BMW is a bigger car and they're still not quite direct rivals, but they get close enough for us to ask just how compelling this new Audi can be.
Welcome then, folks, to the second generation Audi RS3 Quattro Saloon. This one gets the same peak power actually than the last car got, but a little bit more torque. The headline news is in the driveline, so this is the first RS3 that's got a proper torque vectoring rear differential. It's also got optional carbon ceramic brakes, adaptive dampers. A lot of the stuff you might want on a proper full-sized, full-fat super saloon, you can now have on this car. There's been a commensurate jump in the price of this car though to match all that, so this one is £60,000. You can spend more than that, probably up to the thick end of 70, if you want an RS3 Vorsprung with absolutely everything on it. 70 grand. Now, that BMW is only 78, probably mid-80s with every option that you'd want. So this car really has to cut it. It really has to be a credible super saloon and deliver driver appeal at that level to justify that high price.
Now, the M3 is a car that I think has changed in character a bit over the years. It started off as that sort of race homologated four-cylinder, really lightweight, really small car, but as cars, or pretty much all cars, have got bigger over the years, so the 3 Series has, and so the character of this car has inevitably changed a bit. But some things are common to it all the time. It still has a longitudinal engine, it's predominantly rear-wheel drive, and even though this one is four-wheel drive, what happens is that clutch on the front puts power to the front when you need it, and the rest of the time it drives in that sort of pure rear-driven fashion.
And there are all sorts of ways it might do it. Obviously, it could start off by having a really special upmarket feeling cabin. But this is an Audi A3, isn't it? That's the trouble. It's a very special one, but when you sit in it, it feels like an MQB-based hatchback, because underneath, that's also what it is. All the digital technology is present and correct. You've got your digital instruments, you've got your whizzy touchscreen infotainment system. It's all very neatly presented, but it's a bit plain. There's not a lot of variety and richness in the materials. You don't feel like you're sitting in a particularly expensive performance car like you do in the BMW. And also the driving position's a bit high. You feel like you're over the controls. You feel like, I don't know, the sides of the car are a bit closer in, you're a bit more hemmed in, and it's not quite as ergonomically sweet as the BMW is. And there's little things, like the fiddly gear selector and the slightly small plasticky shift pedals. All those things, the details, Audi could do better with.
So you get various different drive modes and you can program them with shortcuts on the steering wheel. So this is programmed at the minute to, in program 1, I get a little bit more slip from the stability control. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference to the four-wheel drive mode. You can, if you want, stick it in full rear-wheel drive with ESC off, and then it will do exactly the same drifty stuff as the rear-wheel drive M3 will do. But that is not what we are about here today. The weather is rubbish. The nights come in really quickly. The roads can be greasy, and it is a public road, which means I can't do any more than 60 miles an hour. Everybody's got a dash cam. Everybody's got a phone with a camera on it. Everybody's a publisher. You just can't drive like your bonkers on the public road. And so what is really important, and this is why I like cars like Toyota 86 or that new Caterham 170, is that a car entertains you at sensible speeds in all conditions, which means up to 60 miles an hour, which means a compact car is great. So about 200 brake horsepower per tonne those two cars have. With a manual gearbox you get lots to do. They're not very big, so you could sort of place the car on the road more easily. Can this car do what those do? Well, yes it can, to an extent.
I suppose the main attraction in this car is under the bonnet, isn't it? This 5-cylinder engine, which, you know, various small Audi RSs have had for a few generations now. It is a pretty special thing. Let's just listen to it for a second. We're in dynamic mode, so that's maximum noisy. Yeah, it definitely sounds pretty special, and it gives the car as much performance as you could want. I mean, particularly on a day like this, you're not going to want to go much faster than you can with 400 horsepower, and the engine's got all this sort of idiosyncratic flavour to it as well as the performance. So it's boosty and it's sweet to listen to. It's actually not as responsive as a BMW's engine. It's got some turbo lag, so when you're coming out of a corner like this, if you're in the wrong gear, you just have to wait a little bit for it to pick up, and then 3,500 revs comes and then it goes. And you can be caught in the wrong gear, and in terms of real world transient response, real world performance, it isn't always as fast out of corners as it could be, but when it comes on boost, it feels all the more dramatic for it. So swings and roundabouts there.
It does feel pure of driving experience. The steering is largely uncorrupted because most of the time the front wheels are not doing any driving. It just has a really sweet sounding engine. It's involving, it's engaging. I am not breaking the law. I am not going to get nicked, and I am having a nice time in here just because it steers nicely all the time. The gearbox is responsive all the time. The engine sounds good all the time. The brake pedal feel and modulation is terrific. And yes, on the way out of a corner, even without driving madly, you can just feel that nice inherent rear wheel drive chassis balance that just suits me down to the ground.
The other way you're looking for this car to really sort of stand up to the BMW, to just compare, be on the same level. It's with the handling, it's with this sort of torque vectored four-wheel drive system that we touched on earlier. Can it do it? Well, I'm not too convinced. We have to remember this is an MQB based performance car, so it's still got a transverse engine. It's got a sort of a front biased four-wheel drive system. It's not like the BMW that sends all of its torque rearwards before it goes forwards as necessary. It's quite different, and I think you can tell, even with this clever rear diff, you sort of have to overwork the chassis of this car to really feel like it's vectoring enough torque to the rear of the car. You have to sort of grab it by the scruff and start boosting it around a little bit to really feel like the four-wheel drive system is working for the chassis on this car. It's not as adaptable as the BMW, the drive modes aren't as well integrated, the technology isn't as easy to just master. In conditions like this, it works because it's secure.
And then if you need it, and there are some markets in which you'll need it more than others, it's got that four-wheel drive security just to get you out of a sticky spot, just to add a bit of traction to the front to save the rear slipping all the time. And depending on where you live, that might be really, really important.
It doesn't have the versatility of the BMW. You can't go, do you know what? I know this corner. It's one of my favourites. I'm going to stick the car in rear-wheel drive mode here because it's easy to do. You just go blip, blip in the BMW and it's there. You've got a rear-wheel drive car. And I'm going to really enjoy the balance of a proper rear-wheel drive chassis. You can't do that here because it always feels like a sort of an old-fashioned four-wheel drive Audi to a lesser or a greater extent. It has its moments, but I don't think they're that exciting. They're not really on the BMW's level.
But the key to it all, and the difference between these two cars that we have here together, and I think Matt will be telling you something similar now, is that although the RS3 has a really characterful engine and it's more compact than this car, somehow the M3 feels more special. And when you're asking a lot of money for an RS3, the sort of money that pretty much gets you into one of these, the M3 feels the more special car of the two. And that's why, for me, despite being a bit wider, which is a bit of a drawback on UK roads, for me, this car is the nicer car to drive. It's the nicer car to be in. It's the nicer car to spend time in. It is, for me, the winner of this test.
So there you have it. The Audi is good, really good, but the BMW feels that bit more special again. We have other Audi tests and other BMW tests. You'll find them elsewhere on this channel. We'd love it if you would like and subscribe, and we're also at autocar.co.uk, in print every week since 1895, and we're on digital magazine subscription. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.